Without leaving his cell, Stephen was unable to bathe, and so his skin began developing fungus and began falling off, and his teeth began to rot. Finally, on May 8th, 2007, so 1 year and 8 months of being in solitary confinement, Stephen was transferred out of his cell to a behavioral institute in Las Vegas, Nevada. After bathing and shaving and cutting his hair and receiving proper medical treatment, he was back to his normal self within a couple of days. And while he was there, he had a chance to speak to a lawyer, and the lawyer would say the entire meeting, Stephen was just saying, "Where have I been?" And the lawyer said, you've been in solitary confinement awaiting trial. You've been there for almost 2 years. And to that, Stephen was shocked and literally didn't believe him. He actually couldn't remember that time in his life. It was like it had driven him crazy and he had completely repressed it from his memory. But when the lawyer told him about it, it began to come back into his mind and he begged the lawyer to not let them send him back to solitary confinement. And his lawyer said, unfortunately, if that's where they're going to keep you, that's where they're going to keep you until you have your trial for this DWI. And unfortunately, we have no idea when that trial is going to be. But stay strong because it's bound to be soon if they've already transferred you to this institute. Stephen stayed at this institute for 2 weeks. And during that time, he asked constantly about when his trial was going to happen, but nobody knew. And at the end of those 2 weeks, Stephen was abruptly taken out of his room, put in a van, driven back to New Mexico, and put back into his solitary confinement cell. And immediately, Stephen began to deteriorate. And he begged the guards to not put him in the cell, but nobody was listening, and before long, the door had shut, and he was all alone again. Within a couple of days, Stephen developed an abscess in one of his teeth, and he tried to get medical attention, but he didn't get it, and so he sat in the corner of his cell, and for 8 hours one day, he rocked back and forth, and violently twisted and yanked and pulled on that tooth until he was able to rip it out of his head. Almost 2 months later, on June 22nd, 2007, Stephen's case was finally put before a judge, and the judge dismissed all of the charges. It's believed the judge found out about this horrible mistreatment of Stephen and took pity on him, but we'll never know. 3 days later, Stephen was released from jail and reunited with his family. He had been in solitary confinement for 2 years without so much as a hearing to tell him what was going on. He had essentially been forgotten about. He would go on to sue the county and win $15.5 million in damages. However, at the same time he's winning this case, he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and given less than a year to live. It's unclear if he is alive today. So that's